Hi, I'm Dennis from Plain Truth Ministry. Welcome to Friday in the Word. This week, as I was working on my writing, I was working in Paul's second letter to Timothy and was beginning work on chapter 3. The first verse of chapter 3 is a warning of danger to Timothy, a reminder of things to come and things that are. Verse 1 of chapter 3 reads, "But know this, that in the last days perilous times will come." Paul goes on in the next four verses to describe what the people of those times will look like, what their behavior will be. And among other things, he mentions lovers of themselves, lovers of money, blasphemers, unthankful, unholy, unloving, unforgiving, slanderers without self control, brutal, despisers of good, having a form of godliness but denying its power. And Paul's telling Timothy in this letter, in this warning, at the end of verse 5, he says, "And from such people turn away." The last days. The last days we can define as the time between Jesus' crucifixion, resurrection, and ascension into heaven, and the day of his second coming. What we know is that second coming will happen. What we don't know is when. We're told that no one knows that but God, not even the angels. Jesus told the apostles this when he was still on this earth. Paul and Peter both wrote of not knowing the day and time of Christ's second coming. But having said that, we know that we need to be ready, because that day could be today, could be tomorrow. We don't know when. What we do know is we need to be ready when he does come. And then that until he comes, perilous days and perilous times will happen. This was apparent prior to Paul's writings. This was apparent shortly after the Pentecost as the church was developing in Jerusalem. There's a story in chapter 5 of Acts of a couple named Ananias and Sapphira. Peter had asked them to sell a piece of property and to bring the proceeds from that sale to the church. They had agreed. They were professing believers and said this is what they would do. But behind the scenes, Ananias and Sapphira concocted a plan where they would give part of the proceeds to the church and keep part of the proceeds for themselves. Ananias came to the church and Peter confronted him and asked him if he was holding some of the proceeds back. Had he done what he had been instructed to do? Peter knew the truth. Ananias owned the truth and immediately fell dead. Several hours later, Sapphira entered the church, and Peter confronted her in the same way, with the same result. Perilous times, perilous people in the early church. In chapter 8, we find the story of Simon the sorcerer, who was a professing believer and who saw the apostles laying of hands on people, healing people, doing miracles, and he wanted that. And he saw it as a money-making proposition and offered the apostles money. They rebuked him and told him unless he was repentant of his sins and truly believed, none of this was possible. Perilous times, perilous people. Throughout Paul's ministry, he suffered much peril. And the peril continues, and he reminded Timothy that the peril was going to continue. And it continues for us today until Christ comes again. Beware and be careful, and God bless. Christ is with you. Amen.